and welcome to Life Beats Radio. I am your host, Dawn Mack, and so glad to be here with you on Tuesday. I mean, gosh, can you believe that it is already July? I don't know where June went. It kind of was just like this whirlwind to me. I was just thinking today, in June, my son graduated, and we went on a family vacation, and almost now, moving into July, it seems like it was eons ago. It just doesn't seem like it was just a couple weeks ago. It's really weird how fast time is going, and this month is already proving to go by fast. A couple of days from now, we're going to be celebrating the 4th, and I hope many of you out there, have big plans. Of course, I know right now there's a lot of weather situations and fire and a lot of things going on in our country that are also at the forefront of everyone's mind. I first of all want to say, our thoughts here and prayers go out to the families of the 19 firemen who lost their lives fighting those fires out west. That is just tragic and horrific, and, we can't help but think about that in the wake of, a celebration that we'll be, doing later in the week. And it's hard to think about celebrating when you know that there are families out there who will not. And, for so many reasons, not just that, but there are any number of reasons. But nonetheless, God is in it, and just when we think he's not, he is always in it. And I kind of lead into our guest tonight, because our guest, I'm so excited to have her on our program, because she has written a book that kind of touches on this and much more. The book is called Ragged Hope. And to give you a little bit of background on our guest, she is the kind of author that tells stories of hope that glows in the dark through her novels and her novellas, her nonfiction projects, her speaking events, and a history of 33 years of an on-air storytelling through the heartbeat of the home radio broadcast. And her books, they have been recognized by Retailer's Choice, RT Reviewer's Choice, Family Fiction Reader's Choice, ACFW Carroll Award nomination, and other honors. And she has, so many books she's released. Novels When the Morning Glory Blooms, and she has now released a book just recently called Ragged Hope. And this book, I was telling her before we went live, is very near and dear to my heart, because just as I got the information about this, I had a situation going on in my life that I was like, oh, my gosh. And it's just amazing how God just shows up when we least expect it, which just is a reminder to us that even when we think there is no hope or God is not near, he gives us exactly what we need when we need it. And we can always rest assured in that. So I would like to introduce to you tonight Miss Cynthia Ruchti. Hello, Cynthia.
Hi, it's just a wonderful joy to be here. Good evening, Dawn.
Good evening, and thank you so very much for taking time out to be with us. We greatly appreciate it. As I was saying in the intro, I've just really been looking forward to speaking with you about your book, Ragged Hope. Because, the first thing that came to mind when I first learned about this book was that, we've all had this moment of sheer, just pure, what am I going to do, ragged hope, basically, that just leads us to wonder, where is God? And why did God let this happen? And, when you think about what's going on right now with the wildfires and the families who've lost their loved ones, the firefighters who've lost their lives, it's moments like that when things happen or when things happen unexpectedly that we really do question that. I think it's human nature. But as I was saying, just in time, God showed up and said, hey, I've got this book you need to read. It's a situation in my own personal life. So gosh, your book, I can already tell, is going to help so many people. And so thank you so much. What a blessing that is.
Well, I know that there are, if everybody else's family is like ours, they've not only experienced things within their own life, their own family life, but they look around them, their circles of influence within their neighborhoods, they look around their church family, they look at their extended family and they see that everybody has a story. Everybody's dealing with something. And for some of those people, it's a short little season. For some others, it's a lifetime of having to hang on by their fingernails while they walk through whatever it is that they've been confronted with. It seems like almost every time one of those situations or circumstances come at us, it kind of blindsides us, and we need to know, where are those holding on places? Where is hope hiding in the middle of all of that? That challenges us so much, and sometimes challenges our faith.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, what actually inspired you to write Ragged Hope?
You know, I in some ways, one of the strongest inspirations for me was a broken heart. I looked around at those that I care about, and I saw that some were dealing with addictions, and then there were those who were living the fallout of that addiction and the choices that were made there. And my heart was broken for those who were having to pull together the semblance of a family when one of the family members walked away or gave up on the family. And I saw those who were trying to survive after abuse, and maybe that was a long childhood of abuse. And we know that many times the perpetrator or the people that get their names in the headlines of the newspaper or the headlines on the news broadcasts, those are the ones who get a lot of attention, but oftentimes it's the people who are in the fallout from those kind of choices that aren't getting very much attention, or they're just slogging through. And I long so much to be able to tell their stories and help all of us understand a little bit better, and even for me to dig a little deeper and understand a little bit better, what does that feel like? I've had some of my own situations like that, and I know what my particular reactions were, the positive responses and the negative ones too, but I saw this resilience and this rebound ability in some of these precious people who were maybe caregiving when they shouldn't have had to, or were picking up the pieces from somebody else's horrific mistake or miscalculation or misguided decision. And that was part of the inspiration, listening to people through 33 years of working with a radio broadcast and speaking to audiences and hearing their stories. And that was a great deal of the inspiration. The other half of the inspiration came from this rock-solid assurance that hope is there and hope is solid and it is rugged no matter what it looks like from our viewpoint, from our side. If it gets worn and tattered looking from our side, that's just the perception that we're seeing. But from God's perspective, it's strong and sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, beautifully said. It is interesting how in those moments, it almost never fails that when someone close to us, a loved one, makes a decision that is life-altering, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It's hard for it not to affect you personally, affect those around the person who has, made the decision or the choice, and unwarranted. It kind of came at you, it blindsided you, and you really just didn't know how to handle it because there was no warning sign. There was no precursor to, okay, this is going to happen kind of thing. And I think sometimes when things like that happen, as they do, because I just call it life, it just happens, and we have a moment of decision, I think, that we have to decide, are we going to allow this to make us bitter or make us better? And I think in every situation God gives us or allows, we are meant to learn something from it. It doesn't always mean that we're going to, but that is the goal. And as you wrote this book from personal experience, can you tell us about a time when your life was greatly affected by a decision that someone else made?
There are many, and I'm sure everyone would have a similar story to tell, that some of those decisions are things that affected me for just a day, or maybe it's a more lighthearted choice that someone made that seemed so minor and just incidental. And then there are those life decisions, those ones that you were talking about, where the decision or the choice that someone else makes, sometimes it's even just accidental. Something happens in life, and there's no one to blame, and blaming doesn't help anything anyway, but it alters things. It changes what we do day to day. We came through a situation in our family just in recent months. Back in October, we had several crises that all hit at the same time. This is just one example, and it's one that I'm using because among all of them that I could choose from, this is kind of a recent one, but it also shows how sometimes those choices that are made aren't intentionally hurtful. It just changes things. Back in October, we had a house fire on the same night that my husband fell from his hunting stand and broke his back and his femur. And in the middle of just ordinary life here, we have this fire remediation going on, and my husband's in the hospital, and I'm not only working on my normal deadlines and the normal responsibilities that I have in life, but I've also become this 24/7 caregiver that I don't remember signing up for, but apparently that was in the marriage vows somewhere. So here I'm sitting at his bedside, and I know that there are things that I could have done that would have prevented that kitchen fire, and he knows that there were things he could have done that would have prevented his fall. And as we sat together in the hospital, by his bedside, where he really could do very little, if anything, for himself, we kind of had just this silent communion of realizing that trying to affix blame wasn't going to help anything. The real question wasn't whose fault it was, but how do we deal with this fallout? And so for many, many months, and even still today, there are some things that were changed. I have to report that he's doing very well. He's back at work. He's had a wonderful healing. My kitchen looks better than ever. Thank the Lord for that. But throughout that time, it was as I was finishing the edits for this book, and I realized that I was walking through some of the things for this short temporary time that some people are walking through for the rest of their lives. And I got this real intense lesson of what is it like when everything about our schedules was upended. Everything about what we did and how we did it was completely changed because of those incidents that happened. And there were several other crises that I won't even mention here in the short time that we have. But that was a real powerful and strong visual for me to be able to see that I had choices, not just this one decision about am I going to respond as Jesus would, or am I going to respond as my nature would have wanted me to. But daily choices, every minute sometimes choices of whether I was going to bear this with grace and rise to the challenge, if I was going to let the resilience that the Lord had already planted in me rise to the surface, or if I was going to stuff that down. One of the things that I learned as I was writing this book is the things I admired in the people who were the survivors, who found at least one thing that they did right and then kept doing that one thing right over and over again, is that God really built the human spirit for a certain amount of endurance. Obviously, our bodies aren't built for forever, but he planted within us, his word says, everything we need for life and godliness. So there's a resilience and a rebound ability within us that is much stronger than we ever think or know when we're hit with something right out of the clear blue. And we sometimes stuff that down. We sometimes just want to sit in a puddle of misery or commiserate about what we're going through. And very oftentimes we have every legitimate reason to do that, and no one would fault us for that. But after we've had that time where tears are very much appropriate, where grieving is very appropriate, there also comes that time where we have to reach out to what God is offering us, reach out for the courage he's offering us, and take one more step. I've been looking at Romans 5, 2 through 5 in a much different light these days. I've known these verses for many, many years. I could rattle them off. At one time I had them memorized, but the verses say, through him we have also obtained access by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we rejoice in hope of the glory of God. More than that, we rejoice in our sufferings, those verses say, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and we can rattle this off, and character produces hope. And now I'm stopping there and I realize, what? Character produces hope? And then the verses go on to say, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. So I'm looking at those verses through new eyes now and realizing that he's put within us what we need. And then we tap into that, or we move forward in that. We look for where that is. Where has he hidden that? What corners is it tucked around? In the folds of this fabric, of this tattered hope that we think we're holding on to, there is this brilliant hope that God can use to help us not just endure and not just survive, but find ways to find true victory in the middle of this, and then help create a pattern for others to follow.
I love what you said there, because as you were speaking, I'm thinking about all those moments in my own life where, I've been up against, adversity, or someone has done something, or even my children, they've made a choice or two that wasn't exactly as I would have had them make it, But one of the things that really profoundly sticks out in my mind is that I wanted to share is coming up this weekend on Sunday will be the 2-year anniversary of my late boyfriend's unexpected passing. And he was 47, and he died unexpectedly of a heart, died in his sleep, but it was later revealed that he either had a heart attack or he had some heart ailment, but he had a heart infection. And so he just passed unexpectedly, and that was probably the one time in my life that I can say I was living by ragged hope, and those first couple of weeks I was just in utter shock because it was so out of the blue. I saw him the night before. Everything seemed great. He had a heart problem that he was taking medication for, but the issue he died from was not related to the heart problem he was being treated for. This was an undiagnosed, unknown ailment that had cropped up that he had no knowledge of. So it took everyone around him by surprise, of course. And, it was very, very hard for me at first. I was asking all the normal questions, why God, why did this happen? If you just sat there 2 years ago and said, Dawn, you're going to be okay. 2 years from now, you're going to be doing, a multitude of radio shows. You're going to be thriving. You're going to be doing great. I probably would have looked at you really strangely because at that moment in time, I really didn't know how I was going to go on. My whole life had been uprooted. I mean, not only did I lose my boyfriend, I lost the relationship naturally because he was gone. And there were a lot of things about that were just immediately ripped from my life. And my whole life was turned upside down, and I had to kind of find myself in terms of what was I doing before he came along, kind of gravitate back to those things. But it was a process, and it was in that moment that I had to decide, how am I going to let this affect me? It's going to it can either have a negative effect or it can have a positive effect. And I knew if I was going to get past it, I was going to have to become a positive ray of light. And I would just start putting stuff out there on social media, and people would keep coming to me going, how can you be this way in light of what you've gone through? And I'm like, well, I don't know of any other way I can possibly be, because I knew being negative was only going to make it worse for me, and everyone around me would not want to see me like that, and especially him. If he were here, he would have said, no, you've got to go on. You've got to be how you've always been. So it was very, very difficult. I won't downplay that, but once I got that within me, I realized, one of the biggest things I learned from that was that when we go through things, and I've been through other things, we always in that moment, I think a lot of people look at the situation and they think, oh, this is a crisis, this is the worst thing I've ever been through. But the saying, this too shall pass, is so true, because there's nothing in life that we can't get through or overcome as long as we have God and we have hope. And if we have God, we're going to have that hope. even if in the beginning it feels like we don't have any hope. But if we believe as believers and children of God, we do have that hope. It's just at the moment it feels like where is it? And to be able to grab hold of it and get pulled out of whatever we're going through, you have to have hope, even if in its most ragged, frayed form in the very beginning. And that was what really kind of spoke to me through that whole experience. And, as I look back on it now, everything we go through in the moment is really horrific and bad. But as you get past it and time goes on, you look back and you go, why did I get so up in arms about this situation? Or why did I let this affect me the way I did? Because you came through it. And, and so that was kind of the one thing that I took away from the situation that I've really learned. And so since then, I don't look at those crises and those moments in time like that the way I used to before that happened to me. But that, it was just a very, very, probably the most defining point in my life. And so, knowing that the weekend's coming up, I'm, some people would be severely grieving. I'm going to make the most of the day and enjoy it as he would want me to. He was full of life and loved the Lord, and, and it gives me great joy to know that's where he is today. And I don't have to toil over where is he, was he saved, that kind of thing. So, there's a lot to be happy about, so we will celebrate that the way it should be. But I don't know, had I not immediately from the very beginning said I'm going to adopt this positive way of looking at this, try to find the good in it, that I could sit here today and say, this is what I intend to do this coming weekend,
Dawn, that's such a beautiful story. And what you had done in your life, what had happened in your life was that you had kind of carved this path of hope. You'd allowed the Lord to carve this path of hope in your life. So when the tragedy struck, there was this, we'll call it a supernatural, but it's from God, this tendency for your life then to slip into that path that had already been carved of hope. There are many people who don't have that already, and the book Ragged Hope, Surviving the Fallout of Other People's Choices, is in a way also very much directed toward those who don't have a solid hope yet and are still looking for that. And sometimes all they have to hang on to is this faint little idea that somehow God must understand. Certainly God sees what's going on, doesn't he? And we know that he not only sees, but he knows why. And God doesn't just react to crises like this. He uses things like that happen to us to create something new and beautiful. The Bible talks about creating beauty from ashes, and sometimes when we look at that concept, we see it as just almost a theological principle, but when we see it at work in people's lives and we see them come from a place of just horrific, dire circumstances, and then there's this great beauty that comes out of it. It sometimes shows itself in things like when there's an unplanned pregnancy or something, but the end result of that is this beautiful baby, and you see the beauty rising out of the ashes. Or if there's a moment where a family is thrust into caregiving, but in the middle of that caregiving, there's a tenderness that's going back and forth between the two people that creates a new thing, this new thing that God is making out of something that looked so horrific in the beginning. We see heroic acts coming out of those who are coming home from war, maybe, and coming home not the way they went in to war. They're coming home different people. My heart goes out to those with post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that, where the wife is dealing with or the husband is dealing with the after effects of what war has done to their mate. What a terrible thing to have to go through, but it is not a place that is void of hope. And that's one of the things. We don't want to give pat answers. We don't want to say, oh, this is easy. If you just turn it over to the Lord, everything will be bright and cheerful and happy. We realize that these are tremendously challenging places to be in. but we want to throw that spotlight on hope and also on people. These are stories in Ragged Hope. These are stories of people from real life who have found a way to find some element of resiliency, something that will help them to recalibrate their lives in a way that they can survive or have already survived what's been thrust upon them, but in a way that is so grace-filled and so admirable that we look at their stories and we learn something for our own. If I could add one more thing, the other element of this is the book is also written for those of us who care about those people. We don't often know how to respond. I don't know what your situation was, Dawn, if there were friends of yours who knew exactly the right thing to say, if there were those who knew exactly how to pray for you, or if you were surrounded by people who cared but didn't have the faintest idea how to minister to you in your pain while you were working through the early stages of it. But our hope is that this book would also offer things, offer practical tips, very practical tips, not pat answers, but some real, genuine, workable ideas for what to do. And some of those ideas come from what I didn't do when I could have, when I'm looking back now and as the stories were told to me, how I could have responded that would have been genuinely helpful rather than just, well, God bless you and I'll pray for you and walk away.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of leads me to a thought, as you were speaking about this, and that is, the area of complaining, because I know it is so easy sometimes when we're in the midst of a crisis, especially if it's something someone else has done, they've made a poor decision or used bad judgment or whatever the case may be, it's affecting us. And I think it goes back to human nature and just the ability to want to vent, discuss it, complain about it. And is there a fine line between complaining about something you're going through caused by another's decision or simply blaming someone else for your problems? I mean, is it even okay to complain about your situation?
I think God very well knew that we would need to talk it over with somebody, and we obviously realized that talking it over with Him is the best choice, the obvious best choice. He knows that we would need, He knew and still knows that we would need friends around us. He knew that David needed a Jonathan to confide in the Old Testament, and that today we need someone that we can confide in and someone who will listen, and their love for the person we're complaining about or the situation we're talking about won't be diminished. They won't accuse us of losing our faith in the middle of all of that while we're talking about how hard it is. David poured his heart out to God in the Psalms about how hard it was to deal with what he was going through, so much of it which was not at all he deserved none of it. He deserved none or most of what he was going through. So he poured his heart out to God, and we're so grateful that he did, because the Psalms have become those places of refuge for so many of us now. What sometimes happens, though, is that we rehearse the story of how awful it is so long that we just grow hoarse, and nothing else happens from it except it creates a deep root of bitterness within us, or it causes other people to have their attitudes fouled and changed too. So there's a time to share, just like Solomon said in Ecclesiastes, there's a time to talk and there's a time to be silent. There's a time to rail against what's happening to us, but then there's a time to just rest in God's embrace and lean back against His heartbeat and sit there in His lap for a while and be comforted in His presence.
Well, and I think in the grand scheme of things, every situation that we encounter or we go through, we have such an amazing ability to cling to hope and cling to God. But a whole part of experiencing that is we have to go through it. I mean, that is part of it. You're not going to get around it. I mean, you could, but it would not, in the long run, not be good or healthy. But there are certain situations, I mean, can you think of a situation where it's just impossible to make the best of it as it occurs?
I think any of us could spell out something from our own life experiences or from things we've seen on television or heard about in our neighborhoods. You know, when we think about a child being killed by a drunk driver or a school shooting or things like that, it is so difficult to imagine just rolling that over onto the Lord, and all of a sudden everything is fine and we're going to be strong. Those are those situations that just cut us to the core. And so many of those stories are told in this book. Stories of people who what's happened to them at the hand of someone else has altered their life so profoundly that it is hard to stand up, much less take another step forward. So those are some of the stories that we're looking at and realizing that it's not that they have to say it's okay that this happened to me, but it's that God is still here in the midst of it, no matter how horrific it looks, no matter how ugly, no matter how difficult it is, and finding in the middle of that sometimes the peace comes because of that relationship. Of turning things over to the Lord, yes, but releasing ourselves into His embrace and looking for the hope He's hidden there. The peace will come first, and then the strength will come after that. It's a remarkable thing. It's in some ways very difficult to define and very difficult to express in words, but my hope is that the stories that are in this book and the insights that are given as we discuss back and forth the topics and as we look to those who are behaving admirably in the middle of just such trying circumstances will strengthen us too and help enable us to follow their path and to make great choices when someone else has made a bad choice that affects us.
Well, Cynthia, I could talk to you for hours on end about this topic. It is just so fascinating, and it's so much of a healing topic. I mean, this book is going to help so many people, and I'm sure it has already, because I do believe you've addressed an issue and a topic here that so many people struggle with when they are faced with, adversity and decisions that are made by others that affect them and change their lives. And so this is a great tool and a great resource, and thank you so very much for writing it and for being our special guest this evening.
Thank you.
Well, take care, and God bless you, and we'd love to have you back again when you release your next project.
I'd love to come back again. And if I could mention, too, if people want to connect with me at www.CynthiaRuchti.com, that's RUCHTI.com, or www.hopethatglowsinthedark.com. I'd love to keep the conversation going.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you so very much again for being our special guest this evening, and God bless you and your work and your ministry.
Thank you, Dawn.
All right. Take care. We've been speaking with Cynthia Ruchti, and I must tell you, what an inspiring lady and what a phenomenal woman who has a real heart for God. And you know, she's no different than anyone else. She's been through things, and she's allowed her experiences that she's had to inspire her to write a book that not only has helped me, but would help anyone who has been through a situation or situations. And I'm telling you, we don't get out of this life without having been through something. I'm a firm believer in that. It's all, I think, part of the journey. It's part of God's plan to bring us to that place of where He wants us to be. And it helps us to grow and learn along the way. And there's much to be learned from situations, especially those that are kind of put upon us, unasked, unexpected. We have that moment of decision, and in the midst of the ragged hopes that we may have, to decide, are we going to be bitter or are we going to be better? And as she was speaking about those situations that sometimes, and we've all seen it, as you just turn on the news any given day, watch it for a few minutes, and you'll see a story that will just really rip you to the core of what someone has done out there that is just unthinkable, unimaginable. And but a lot of times I think our first inclination is, how could he or she? Why would he or she? But, really, at the root of it all, we have to remember that even though there's evil in the world and there are people who commit evil acts, that God created those people. He didn't create them to be that way. We're all given free will, and we're all given the ability to make those choices. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that they're children of God too. And I think that's where forgiveness comes in. It's hard to forgive someone who has gone into a school and shot children for no reason, under the sun, to do the unthinkable, and then to find that they're mentally ill. It's a hard thing to try and do. And I think we have to always kind of remember, what would Jesus do in this situation? And Cynthia said it's not easy to just say, well, I'll pray for you and go on about your business and try to, sweep it under the rug, if you will. I think sometimes we really have to sit and think about that because, we're all sinners at the end of the day, and God doesn't sit and go, well, this person's sin is a little more than that person's sin. Sin to God is sin. And, at the end of the day, I think we have to kind of, our goal in this life, I think, is to try to be as Christ-like as we possibly can be, and that is a daily walk, and it's a daily struggle because of everything that we're up against in this life and the people we encounter and the situations that we encounter and the things that happen unexpectedly that we just don't see coming. So it is a very, very difficult thing, but I think each thing makes us stronger, each thing makes us better, and it gets us a little bit closer to where we're supposed to be. So I hope that you've enjoyed our interview this evening. I know I certainly did. What a blessing Cynthia is. And, again, if you would like to visit her website, you can go to CynthiaRuchti.com and also HopeThatGlowsInTheDark.com, and you can find any of her books, but especially her latest, Ragged Hope, Surviving the Fallout of Other People's Choices. I highly recommend it. It's a great book. So thank you again to our special guest, Cynthia Ruchti, and I'm sorry, folks. There was an unexpected. I got disconnected unexpectedly from the line. I am so sorry. It's happened twice during the interview. So I do apologize. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Fortunately, our guest was not cut off. But as I was saying, Cynthia is also on Twitter at Cynthia Ruchti, and that's RUCHTI. And follow her, and you can also visit her website. So thank you so very much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Tomorrow night, we are going to have another author with us, and I'm equally as excited to speak with her because she's written a book that I think is also a great topic and could prove to be a great resource tool. Her book is called The What Happens If I book. How to Make Action Reaction Work for You Instead of Against You. The author is Betsy Otter Thompson, and she is going to be here. We will be discussing her book, and man, every chapter is just a very quick read, but every chapter is a what if, and the outcome, the scenario, the action, the reaction of how you would handle it. And so can't wait to speak with her. And her book, again, was written based on personal experience and those things that she did for so many years of her life until she really began to look at things differently, and this book was born of that. So we will be speaking with her. She will be here at 8 p.m. Eastern, so we hope that you will be here for that. All right, that is going to wrap our show for this evening. Thank you again to our guest, Cynthia Ruchti, for being with us, and thank you to all of you. If you're brand new to our program, welcome aboard. We're always glad to have new listeners, and we hope that you will be back. So take care, everyone. Have a great night, all. God bless, and we'll see you again tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern.